Welcome everyone, I am Adesewa Josh and this is Africa Matters. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visits Ethiopia to bolster support for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government. We'll look at what this means for Ethiopia and the African continent. In Sudan, protesters say no to a transitional deal signed with military rulers last month, insisting there will be no negotiation and no compromise on returning to civilian rule. And Nigerians are feeling the heat in the kitchen as government regulations trigger a hike in the price of cooking gas. China has scaled back its financial commitment to Africa for the first time in more than a decade. At the Triennial Forum on China-Africa Cooperation held in Senegal earlier this week, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged $40 billion in investment and credit lines, a 33% drop from the $60 billion announced at the same summit in 2018. Xi Jinping did offer to support the African Union's goal to vaccinate 60% of the continent's population against COVID-19 by 2020.
I am announcing here that China will provide Africa with 1 billion doses of additional vaccines, including 600 million in the forms of a donation and 400 million in other forms, such as joint production between Chinese companies and the African countries concerned. In addition, China will carry out 10 health projects and send 1,500 medical professionals and public health experts to Africa.
The announcement comes amid criticism of China's past deals that have provided infrastructure in exchange for African commodities. Some experts say those agreements risk putting African countries in a debt trap. The IMF says more than 20 African countries are currently in debt distress, and that the number is likely to rise due to the coronavirus pandemic. As Africa's largest bilateral creditor, China holds more than 20% of the continent's debts. Angola, Ethiopia, and Kenya are China's top 3 debtors, with a combined loan of $45 billion. At least 18 African countries are renegotiating their Chinese loans to remove unfavorable clauses. The Democratic Republic of Congo is currently reviewing a $6 billion deal with Chinese investors over concerns that the agreement benefits China more than the DRC. And earlier this week, there were reports that the Ugandan government could lose its only international airport to China after failing to repay a $207 million loan. The Entebbe International Airport and other Ugandan assets were used as collateral in the loan deal. And now Beijing appears to have taken a different approach in the ongoing Ethiopia-Tigray crisis. During a diplomatic visit to the capital Addis Ababa, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi declared his country's support for the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed as it fights to reclaim strategic cities from the Tigrayan forces. China has also publicly opposed U.S. sanctions against Ethiopia at the Security Council, saying it believes the parties in the conflict have the capacity to resolve their differences. Now let's hear more from Adetunji Omotola, an independent African affairs analyst. He joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you so much for making time. China has officially expressed solidarity for Abiy's government in the ongoing Ethiopia-Tigray crisis. Is this unprecedented, and are we likely to see China take similar decisions in other African countries where its interests are at stake?
Look, I think there's a long relationship that China has with Ethiopia. In fact, if you look at Ethiopia's economic policy, it's more similar to China because they're focused on the internal dynamics of their country. Unlike countries like Nigeria that are really pro-West, Ethiopia has a very, very strong, solid relationship with China. And if you've heard murmurings, I think there are many people who believe that the crisis in Ethiopia has some Western intervention around it. And I suspect that what China has done is to raise its hand up and say, look, we're going to support our ally.
Have China's loans spurred growth in Africa? And do you share the popular opinion that some of these loans are a potential debt trap for African countries?
Well, look, China's loans surely have helped Africa's profile. There are many projects from infrastructure in terms of port and rail, particularly in Nigeria. Nigeria seems to be the best example of how China's loans have spurred infrastructure and development. A lot of places or cities in Nigeria are now linked. There's this special one, the Abuja, Kaduna rail, the Lagos to Ibadan rail. I mean, Nigeria would simply not have been able to raise those kind of monies from its budgets to be able to fund those railways. I think the challenge, though, is that because of COVID-19 and the decline in many African economies, because a lot of these economies are resource rich and they're focused around one resource. So when you have a dip in the price of oil, as we've had in Angola and Nigeria, then it affects the ability to be able to pay these loans back. And that is what people are complaining about. But in the main, I don't think that there is a debt trap, in the sense that these countries, if they're able to bounce back, if they're able to vaccinate their people and create opportunities around jobs for young people, I believe that they'll be able to come out of the debt trap. The only problem there is that if you look at the size of the economies and the loans, total amount of loans, Chinese loans now is about 10% of Africa's GDP. And that is worrying. But if we focus on the intra-Africa trade, with the African leaders are really driving, if they can grow the GDP of Africa to about 3.4 trillion, I believe that the loans will be smaller if you look at the size of the GDP. So I don't think it's really a negative thing to have those debts. But what will need to happen is Africa needs to trade more with China. As President Ramaphosa said, that trade deficit between Africa and China needs to really be focused upon. And then technology transfer as well.
Thank you so much, Adesewa Josh, an independent African affairs analyst, for sharing your thoughts with us on Africa Matters. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says Southern African countries should not be penalized for travel bans just because the Omicron variant of the coronavirus was identified there first. He says South Africa should instead be commended for alerting the world about the new development.
We've rejected this notion that is being propagated by more developed economies and some, smaller countries, that the Omicron variant is the one that should lead to a blockage and a ban of travel. We reject that in the strongest of terms, because to us it amounts like discrimination against a country like ours and some countries in Southern Africa. In fact, we should be applauded as South Africa for having alerted the world about this variant that is now beginning to spread around the world.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also slammed the travel restrictions imposed by Western countries on Southern Africa, describing them as a form of travel apartheid. It called for common sense to prevail.
What is unacceptable is to have one part of the world that is one of the most vulnerable parts of the world economy condemned to a lockout when they were the ones that revealed the existence of a new variant that, by the way, already existed in other parts of the world, including in Europe, as we know. So this is a very strong appeal that I launch, appeal to common sense.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including
cooking gas in a 12.5 kg cylinder like this one sold for around $7 in January. Now the cost has jumped to nearly $25. I am Ajak Mangut in Abuja, and I'll be explaining to you how this increase is causing Nigerians to use unsafe alternatives like charcoal and firewood.
Welcome back. The camel is king in Somalia. It's everything from food to currency, but more importantly, it gives the owner status. But the country is suffering from drought, and there is a state of emergency in place. So the herders whose lives depend on camels are facing a very tough choice: to herd their camels or leave their land. Dominic Bryan Amonda reports.
Nomad Ali Abdi Elmi says his camels are a gift from the gods. They feed him and he searches out grass for them in the middle of the desert.
I drink camel milk because it's nourishing. The milk is good for us because camels graze from trees with medicinal properties that help fight diseases. I have 5 children and we all depend on camel milk to survive.
The camel is king in this culture.
Camels are very important in Somalia because one is always considered rich or can rise in social status by the number of camels he has.
Camels are valuable investment in Somalia. A camel of this caliber can sell up to $1,000. But as the drought takes hold, life gets more difficult for herders. It's forcing them to travel further to find food and water for their animals.
I am facing drought and famine. My fellow ranchers and I have lost a lot of camels and cattle.
Somalia has weathered a 2020 cyclone and several recent droughts. Natural disasters have killed thousands of herds of livestock. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, animals account 80% of the country's exports. Hunger and desperation have driven millions of Somalis to the cities. Herders don't want to give up life on the land, but they say they may have no choice if the climate continues to decimate their livestock and livelihoods. Dominic Brano-Mondi, Africa Matters.
The cost of cooking gas in Nigeria has been steadily rising since the beginning of the year. The price has gone up by 240%, causing many to abandon gas for cheaper alternatives like charcoal and firewood, which can be harmful. Ajak Mangut reports.
38-year-old Adaduru is lighting her charcoal stove to prepare dinner for her family. She says she had to stop using gas to cook about 2 months ago because she could no longer afford it.
I was using gas before because of the price have increased. I started using charcoal. How much even am I making in my business to buy gas? Even the charcoal is stressful for me. But what am I going to do? It's only what I can afford.
Vincent Ilya visits this station to refill his cooking gas cylinder, but he says he cannot afford it for much longer.
I used to buy gas 1 kg 350 naira, but now 1 kg reach 1,000 and something. I can't keep buying gas 1 kg for 1,000 and something. Now I'm thinking to go back to firewood. Actually, we are praying that this government let them check this thing and let them reduce this price for us.
The current rise in the price of cooking gas has been blamed on Nigeria's high dependence on imports, with the rising exchange rate of the dollar against the naira. Experts say only about 30% of what is consumed is produced locally. The Nigerian Association of Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers say the reintroduction of customs duty and value-added tax on imported gas is also responsible for the rising cost of the product. The price of cooking gas in a 12.5 kg cylinder like this one was just a little above $7 in January. Now it sells for nearly $25, forcing many Nigerians to look for other ways to prepare their food. But alternatives to cooking gas are unsafe. The World Health Organization says nearly 4 million people die prematurely each year from illnesses related to household air pollution caused by the inefficient use of solid fuels and kerosene for cooking. Bright Ugu is a gas plant consultant and managing director of Loop Gas. He says the government needs to act fast, especially in improving the local production of cooking gas to help lower the price.
How we can solve the root problem is where the indigenous people that are producing will produce more. There will be capacity, they will increase the capacity of their plants to produce more. Then energy will increase their supply. Then we will now rely smaller, more, little or no quantity from the imports that we are getting from outside Nigeria.
Nigeria's federal government is aiming to provide 5 to 10 million gas cylinders next year to help 90% of households use gas for cooking by 2030. The country's Ministry of Petroleum Resources says the price of gas is determined by international market forces, but it will make some adjustments to lower the cost. But until that happens, Nigerians like Ada will have to depend on charcoal stoves and firewood to prepare their meals. Ajak Mangut, Africa Matters, Abuja.
Staying in Nigeria, residents of the northern city of Maiduguri are battling other energy costs. The city used to be a major stronghold for Boko Haram, but in 2015, the terror group retreated to the Sambisa forest near Lake Chad after an offensive launched by the federal government. But as Usman Ali Yuba reports, an attack earlier this year on electricity transmission lines in the city, combined with the high cost of fuel, are making it difficult for residents and business owners in Maiduguri to make ends meet.
Garba Zango is one of many business owners in Maiduguri who relies on a generator to cope with the city's inconsistent power supply. He says the past 10 months have been the most difficult ones he's faced in the last 50 years. He blames that on the recent hike in the price of diesel by Africa's largest crude oil producer and sabotaging of power stations by Boko Haram. He says he spent about $22 every day.
We used 2 generators in shift. But at that time, the gas was okay, the price of gas is okay, diesel. But now it has gone to an extent that every day, if we have to work, we have to buy 9,000 naira gas every day. Unless if there is no work, then we can manage and sit down like this. And to be honest, not only printing, but everything has been affected.
Hundreds of thousands of residents that rely on electricity in the city are also finding it more difficult to keep the lights on.
When we are using electricity, we can able to own all of our fridge at the same time. But by using gen, we are using only 4. This causes loss to us in our business.
According to the World Bank, nearly half of all Nigerians lack reliable access to energy. Experts say that's hurting Africa's most populous nation.
This has now thrown a spanner in the works because it's increased the cost of doing business in the city. It's pushing some people back into poverty, and it's just affecting the general economic life in the city.
In January, Maiduguri was plunged into complete darkness for almost 2 days when members of Boko Haram bombed the power transmitters that connect the city to the national grid. Authorities have promised to fix the city's power supply, but so far most of the damage has gone unrepaired. Residents of Maiduguri hope the government will urgently implement a robust plan to help keep their businesses afloat, one that includes protecting and boosting the city's power supply. Usman Ali Uba, Africa Matters.
You're watching Africa Matters, and here's a roundup of other stories making news across the continent. Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have launched a joint military operation against rebels from the Allied Democratic Forces. ADF is accused of masterminding terrorist attacks on civilians in both countries. It was founded in the early 90s in Uganda and later fled to the DRC, where the UN says the group has killed thousands of civilians since 2013. In Sudan, thousands of protesters have rallied against the military takeover and the deal to reinstate Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Demonstrators marched on the presidential palace in the capital Khartoum on Tuesday. Security forces responded with tear gas to disperse the crowds. Last month, Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan reinstated the prime minister amid international pressure after a coup. The people have slammed the deal and accused Hamdok of betrayal. A study by World Weather Attribution says Madagascar's current famine is not caused by global heating, contradicting a recent UN report. According to research released on Thursday, poverty and weather conditions are to blame. Rainfall has been 40% below average, causing severe drought and crop failures across the country. Nearly 3 decades on, Rwanda is still most remembered for a genocide that left more than 800,000 people dead. But a new generation of fashion designers is working to change that, hoping to make the country synonymous with stylish clothing and accessories, rather than its anguished past. Sharon Ogunleye has the story.
In Rwanda's capital, Kigali, Shode Shimwe is busy creating eco-friendly handcrafted shoes. She launched her company in 2013. Unlike many designers new to the business, she struggled to gain ground. But her passion for fashion paid off when the government hiked import taxes on second-hand clothing from the US and Europe and waived taxes on imported fabrics.
We have seen people slowly shifting from wearing and being proud of wearing imported products to wearing locally made products. I think it's been of a very big impact where on one hand high taxes were imposed, on another hand taxes were dropped, where we got really people to also be proud of wearing locally made products, and here we are today.
The government's decision helped give a much-needed economic boost to the industry. But they say it wasn't just about money, but about reclaiming dignity. And ever since then, Rwanda's fledgling fashion industry has thrived.
After being supported, after being put it on the front scene to really show what we can do, we started dig into the culture, we started digging into the patterns, into different type of things which really make us different to the rest of East Africa.
Matthew Rugamba is another Rwandan designer determined to put Kigali on the global fashion industry map.
So many things are happening, changing, growing in this country, and then fashion is part of it. So it's part of this whole ecosystem of inviting the world into our country. It is this whole ecosystem of telling a new story of our country, an untold story. I want to make sure that we've had a rich design history. We have a rich design history, but it is something that maybe the world didn't know.
The designers say they are pleased to see how their efforts are changing the country's perception of homegrown designs.
10 years ago, when you Google Rwanda, you will only see machetes and people killing each other and hungry kids on the streets. So we, as designers in Rwanda, are also contributing to changing the narratives of Rwanda and mostly to changing how people perceive Rwanda, because we're more than that.
Rwandan designers are determined to become an inspiration to other countries on the continent by rising from ashes of the past and creating something new for the world to talk about and wear. Sharon Ogunleye, Africa Matters.
We go to Ivory Coast, where commuters in the congested commercial capital Abidjan spend hours a day in heavy traffic. But with boats offering faster and cheaper trips across the lagoon, the waterways are becoming an attractive alternative. Sumaya Jaylan has more.
Abidjan is a bustling hub of 5.4 million people. Its roads are congested and often poorly maintained. The government estimates residents spend about 3 hours a day commuting.
When you take the bus, you can see how the roads are congested. You leave at 4 p.m. and you arrive at 10 p.m. That's a problem.
But luckily, almost every neighborhood is on the water. The city liberalized transport on the lagoon back in 2016. It's hoping to attract more private operators and plans to build modern boat stations in each district.
Before, it was a disaster. I had to get up really early, 5 a.m., sometimes even 4 a.m., so I could avoid traffic. But now I wake up at 6 a.m. and go by boat.
Currently, about 100,000 people travel by water every day, nearly half in traditional boats. Ivorian authorities are hoping to expand water travel in the next 5 years, aiming to have 200 modern boats in operation compared to the current 50.
There is real movement underway on the lagoon, and the state is working to ensure boats are safe so people feel secure. We are also working to modernize the equipment and the docks. We want to make them more attractive. For example, if people drive to the dock, they can park their vehicle, leave it at the station, and continue to their destination by boat.
Transport company Aqualines is taking advantage of this growing market. Its ferries can carry more than 200 seated passengers. Not only are ferries faster than buses, they're also cheaper. Yet another reason why Ivorians are swapping the congested roads for the open water.
Sumaya Jaylan, Africa Matters.
And this week, we explore Rubavu district, the jewel of Western Rwanda. And that's our show this week. Thanks a lot for watching. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode, or ideas on what you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle at Adesewa Josh for scoops or breaking news. We'll leave you with these images from across the continent.